So now we're going to configure some VLANs, and we're going to do these through the use of pools. We're going to find that we can do one of two types of pools. We can do dynamic pools where they're dynamically allocated based on EPG creation, or we can do static pools. For most of like our bare metal host installs, our static path bindings, we're going to be using these static VLAN pools. If we're integrating with a VMM domain, so like Microsoft Hyper-V or vCenter, we're going to use dynamic VLAN pools for those, because as we create EPGs that are pushed to the VMM domain, a VLAN ID out of that dynamic pool will dynamically be used. Okay, so what we're going to do is create a couple for our bare metal hosts as well as our future VMM domains. So to do this, we're actually going to go down here to pools. Okay, and again, we're still under Fabric and access policies, but now we're going to, and actually let me just make these smaller, we're going to go down and add these VLAN pools. So notice there's nothing currently under here. We've got no multicast, VXLAN, VNIs, or VLAN pools identified. So I'm going to create a VLAN pool. This first one's going to be for my bare metal hosts. So I'm actually just going to call this Army BMH for bare metal host VLAN. We're going to do static VLAN allocation for these guys, and then we'll add our blocks. So again, kind of like our ports, I do these basically a VLAN at a time. So I'm going to be using VLANs 1000 and 1001 for these guys. So I'm just going to say range is going to be from 1000 to 1000. We'll click OK. And then I'll add another one, and this one will be 1001, whoops, to 1001. Again, I'm inheriting the allocation mode from the parent, so I don't need to do static or dynamic here. And we'll click Submit. Okay? The next thing that we'll do is we'll create a dynamic pool that we're going to use for our VMM integration. So I'm going to say Army, we'll say VMM VLAN. We'll do dynamic allocation, and this one I will use a range for. So I'm going to use 1005 to 1020. And I'm again going to inherit the mode from the parent switch. We'll go ahead and click Submit. So now I've got one static as well as one dynamically allocated VLAN domains. So again, these are pretty cool because these aren't just your traditional VLANs. What we're going to find is that once we start identifying endpoints, we'll see that we utilize VLANs out of those pools more for mapping to VXLAN VNIs. Now in some instances we do still use the traditional tag coming in from maybe an external layer 2 domain, and we use that for mapping towards an EPG. But most of the time these VLANs don't matter. They're just going to be mapped to an internal VNI, and again, I shouldn't say typically, in most instances, the VLAN identifier itself is not important, okay? Because it's one of the things we're really trying to get rid of is identification via VLAN. So now we've got our VLANs identified, and if we look at kind of this picture that we're developing as we go along here, remember we have our switches identified here. We have our ports identified here, and then we have our, basically, I'm going to call it our port policy identified here within these interface policy groups. So notice we're skipping quite a bit of area here that we're going to start to fill in, and over here we identified our VLANs, okay? So now we're going to start filling in this puzzle from this side, okay? And push these VLANs out towards the ports. Okay, that's our end goal here, is we want to take these VLANs and push them out towards these respective ports. So in our next video, we're going to create the domains that are going to basically contain these VLANs, and then we're going to tie everything together with these AAEPs, or attachable entity profiles. Okay, so that's kind of how we're moving along here. So stay tuned. In the next video, we'll create our first set of domains.